It's here. We are redefining what it means to sit at the girls' table. Hey everybody, welcome to the girls' table. Today we have Ahana Banerjee, who started Clear. She actually dropped out of college, went through YC, and raised a pre-seed round last November. So Ahana, thank you so much for being here today. I would love to start off if you just want to give a little background about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me here, Alana. So as you mentioned, I started my company Clear back in January of 2021. So it's been about a year and a half now. At the time, I was a student. I was doing my physics degree at Imperial. Started the degree very much with the intentions of going into academia and becoming a physicist. But kind of the more I went through that journey, the more I discovered entrepreneurship and other careers, and simultaneously had been struggling a lot with my skin, suffering with acne really badly. And I kind of wanted to use the two skills to something good and powerful that could really help people. So, when the opportunity came with Y Combinator, it was a no-brainer for me to take the risk and jump into building the company full time. And so since then, learned an incredible amount, lots of ups and downs with being a startup founder. But I think overall, I'm just so grateful for the opportunity and the experience to build a company at this stage of my career.
Awesome. And for everybody listening today, what exactly is Clear and what is your mission with Clear?
Yeah, absolutely. So Clear is a skincare routine tracking and sharing mobile app. So what that means is, in the same way that you may track your diet with an app or exercise or menstrual cycle, with Clear, you can track your skincare routine. So you can log the products you use, any medications you're on, and your progress photos. In the app, you can share that very easily with your doctor or dermatologist. But then that whole tracking is then built into a social community. So you can find and connect with people with skin like you. And rather than seeing kind of the sponsored or curated content that we're used to on a lot of social media platforms, you can actually see exactly which products real people with skin like you are using. And that then forms the basis of recommendations that we make to users. So we're not sponsored by any one brand in particular. We're not trying to sell our own products. We're really just trying to help the everyday consumer navigate this crazy skincare market with so many products and actually find things that work for them and track that, make sure that they're really working.
And something that I want to mention to you, which I actually didn't get the chance, is I love your mission. I actually struggled with acne growing up, especially in high school. And I truly believe the amount of times I looked on Google to try to find something or somebody who was dealing with what I was allergic to salicylic acid, so anything for acne. And I just couldn't find anything that worked. And so I think for people who struggle with different skincare, it's so important to talk to other people, just normal people not being sponsored, that are also going through the same thing.
100%. And it's also quite a lonely experience. And especially if the people around you, your friends and family, might not often realize how sensitive you can be emotionally when people comment on it or say things where it's not like I don't know I have acne. and it's small things like not feeling comfortable going outside without makeup, or if you're in school having to do like a sports or PE class and where your makeup's not on and everyone's going to see, you feel immensely self-conscious, and oftentimes there isn't really an outlet for that, when in fact 85% of all people will experience some kind of skin issue in their life. It's a very normal thing to go through. And what we're trying to also do is open up that conversation and normalize the fact that, of course, if you want to wear makeup, that's fine. If you want to cover up any perceived blemishes that you have, that's fine. But equally, it's okay to have them, and it's okay to talk about them, and it's okay to want to try to get rid of them as well.
Yeah, and I think for me, I was getting the acne, then I was covering up with makeup, which was causing me to get more acne, and it's like a constant battle. So I know you mentioned that you also struggle with it, but what really just made you decide to focus on skincare?
Honestly, it was a couple of things. So before starting Clear, I was actually working on a different idea. So it was an idea called Quill, and it was a B2B SaaS meeting minute software. So completely different to what I'm building now. And to be honest, I started with that because I didn't think I'd be taken seriously as an entrepreneur if I built a consumer product or something for skincare. It just sounded too, I don't know, at the time I didn't know much about the world of funders, and I thought that to be taken seriously, like it's a legitimate company, it should be in the B2B SaaS space. So I came up with an idea based on, an issue that I'd had, which is I didn't like taking meeting notes. And it was fine. And I worked on that for a few months. But the more deeply I got into that, the more I realized, number one, how important it is to be motivated by the industry that you work with and actually want a change. Sure, I didn't like taking meeting minutes, but did I see myself dedicating the next, 10, 15 years of my life to solving that problem? Not really. I realized when building a company, there is a question around who is the best person to build this. And I couldn't honestly justify why I was better with my undergraduate physics degree building this platform versus machine learning experts or NLP experts who really understand the text summarization. So I was thinking about problems that I've actually experienced. And in fact, if I wanted to use the technical skills that I have, I was fortunate that I did a technical degree. I can code by myself and build, initial versions of products myself. I thought, what's something that I can actually build better than the average startup founder in my position who wants to start a company? And I realized that the fact that I'd been in these mainly Facebook groups and Reddit threads for years and years and years, I'd already built up somewhat of a community in the space. And I already knew at that point, and it was a mistake I made with the previous company. With the previous company, I didn't talk to any users. I just wrote code and then launched, and then no one wanted to use it, and it didn't go so well. So this time, I watched YC Startup School. I spoke to a couple of founders, and I realized how important keeping users in the iteration process is. And I realized that for me, it's actually very easy to find my target demographic. I'm in these communities already. And I love talking to people about skincare. Like the fact that it's my job to do that now is honestly a dream if you'd have told me 2 years ago. And so I realized that, on the one hand, I'm well suited to build this. I have the technical skills to build this platform, and I actually have the market knowledge as well. And in addition to that, it was kind of just the broader motivation of feeling that firsthand frustration about not knowing which products to use, not knowing whether they're working, feeling like there's way too much marketing in the industry and a complete distraction from actual efficacy. And another part of our vision is also to be working with brands and retailers and actually providing the people making the formulations with this data to allow them to basically make more effective formulations. Because another big problem in the industry is the fact that there's a massive data gap. There aren't long-term studies on how cosmetic products are performing on regular people's skin over an extended period of time. And because of that, the people actually making the products, it's very difficult to iterate if you don't have data. So that's kind of another part of what we want to do, is actually try and cause this industry-wide change and empower brands to also make more data-driven cosmetic formulation decisions.
I love those two questions that you ask yourself. Do I want to be working on this for the next 10 plus years? And why am I going to be the one to really be able to go ahead and make this company successful? You had this idea, you're still in college, and then what happened?
Maybe we should rewind a little bit. So I had Quill, which was the initial idea. And about a week into working on that, one of my then teammates mentioned Y Combinator to me. And at the time, I had heard of it, but I didn't really know what it was. I obviously knew some of their portfolio companies, but I was still very much in that student mindset. If I saw a job opening, I would apply to it. I didn't care if I was underqualified, whatever, I just apply. And so I went on the YC website and I saw they had applications open. I thought, why not? I don't really know too much about this. And in hindsight, I think the fact that I was so naive was a benefit. If I'd have actually known what it was, I think I'd have been too scared to apply. But thankfully, ignorant me just went into it, not really thinking too much of it. And I actually only told my co-founder, so we had a small team at that time, just all of us were in uni doing the same degree, that, oh, I've applied to this. At first they laughed at me, and then we recorded the video together to, almost for fun, just to see what happened. But none of us thought there was even a chance, the smallest chance that it would work out for us. Applied to YC with Quill, started actually working on Quill. At the time, it was only a week old. The more we got into it, the more some of these issues came out. And to be very specific about what the issues were, the training data set for this summarization was trained on American accents. So for this product to work, in the demos, we had to talk in phony American accents to actually get the transcription to it. This is kind of the level of technological innovation that we're talking. There were some serious problems with Quill, and deep down, I really wanted to pivot. About a month after applying to YC and completely forgetting about it, and at this time, university had started. It was my master's, my final year of the degree as well. A month after, we hear back from YC saying that we had an interview. And although I knew very little about YC, I did know even just to get an interview, it's quite competitive. And at that point, I was, wow, this is a serious opportunity. And I spoke to a YC alumni, and I don't think he will remember this, but I was emotionally scarred. He was horribly unimpressed with me and my team, and was
Oh
basically,
no.
what? So you have an interview and like you haven't talked to a single user and you haven't launched your product? And I was, no. He was, well, you have to launch something. And I was noted. The advice is crystal clear. And in fairness to him, he was right. At that point, that's actually when I enrolled in startup school and tried to learn more about how to actually build a company. And at that point, I was very lucky that we had 2 months from finding out that we had an interview to actually having it. So there was time to kind of basically do something. In those 2 months, me and the team, we worked together on top of our studies to get an initial version of this product. And even though still there was this lingering feeling of I want to pivot, there was also the other side of it, which was YC they accepted us to interview with this idea. They already probably don't think that, well, this alumni clearly didn't think very highly of us. We don't want to give people more reasons to not take us seriously. And back then I also didn't know about pivots. I didn't know that was a thing. I thought if your company fails, that's the end, and go work in finance or tech or something else. Don't start another company. I was way too scared to tell YC that, I was thinking of pivoting. The interview that we had with YC was actually with Quill to begin with. And what we knew is that they call you if you're successful and they email you if you're unsuccessful. And you have to be sort of at your desk for the next 6 hours in case they have any follow-up questions after the interview. Now,
That is so scary.
It is terrifying, yeah. And, because it was all done remotely, this was in the midst of the pandemic in 2020. So they were in San Francisco. For us in the UK, the first interview happened at 10 p.m. and then we had to be awake till 4 a.m. in case there was any follow-up communication. And that night, keep in mind, we've got our phones next to us in case they call, in case it's good news. And they don't give much away either in the interviews. There's no pleasantries at the beginning. It's only 10 minutes. It's like rapid fire questions. So we're there, and that night we received 4 emails from YC, and every time it was a heart-sinking moment that, hey, this is the rejection email, this is the rejection email, and every time it was clarification questions. So the first was, can we see a demo, which was my worst nightmare because the product was so bad, but we showed them what we had anyway. We showed them the transcription. At least they had American accents, so their part was transcribed okay.
Did you have to hop back on the phone? Okay, let me walk you through a demo, or?
No, so at this point, what I had I don't know if it was a faux pas or not, but the first question YC normally ask is what are you working on? And I had said a meeting transcription and summarization tool. In fact, it's recording right now. And they didn't like it in the interview, I don't think. They seemed a bit put off by it. But because I had told them that it was taking notes, I kind of dug myself into my own grave by telling them that we have a product that's working. So they were like, all right, show us what it did. And so we sent that to them. And then I was great, it's just a matter of time before they reject us now. Then they sent us another email asking how long we've really been working on this idea for. Of course, it hadn't been very long. It had really been about 2 months, but part-time on top of our studies. And we're all doing fairly intense degrees as well. So then, we're like, okay, they haven't rejected us yet. And the next email comes through. We're like, great, this is it. Then they asked us what an integrated master's is. Are you postgrads? Are you undergrads? We don't understand these UK degrees. And so we clarified that situation. And then finally at around 4 a.m., we get this long email. And the crux of it was, we like you, but we don't like your idea. We've seen companies try this in the past and it's never really worked out before. And you are too early stage for us to know whether you've actually got a different take on it. So we want to talk to you again in a week, come up with something better, or show us more traction on Quill.
In a week.
In a week.
Oh my God.
So yeah, as you can imagine, that evoked some mixed feelings. On the one hand, it's a huge compliment to be told by YC that they like us and they see something. On the flip side, it's the question of what on earth am I supposed to do in a week? To make matters worse, it was also our last week of term. So our first interview was on the 11th of December. The second one was on the 18th. And that week of the 18th was our final week. So we had master's thesis deadlines, exams, probably the worst week of term right before Christmas. And so, you know what, this is a massive opportunity for us. Let's take it seriously. And at that point, I literally just time blocked every hour of the next week. This is the small amount of revision time to uni. This is the time to brainstorm a new idea. This is time to build a new landing page. This is time to do new user interviews. And I didn't have a proper backup. All I had felt is that I'm not sure I want to work on Quill, but I also hadn't devoted time into thinking, so what do I want to work on? I was so focused on making as much progress with Quill before YC.
And how big was the team at Quill working on this?
Well, when we submitted the YC application, which was a week into it, there were 4 of us. When we had our interview, there were 3 of us. So one of the team members, he made it, he didn't think it was going anywhere. He was like, yeah, I'm out. I need to focus on my final year of uni. And we were like, fine. And then even though we had the YC interview, our then CTO had made it quite clear that he's happy to join the team and do this on the side at uni, but he wants to take his grad job. He doesn't want to start his career in a startup. He wants the stability and the security of a high-paying tech job, which he'd already secured. And equally, his parents were like really not happy with him leaving his master's degree. For me, that wasn't the case. For me, this was my dream career. I just never thought I'd get the opportunity so soon. For me, the choice of turning down my grad jobs wasn't that big a deal because this is what I'd really want. But he had expressed that before. But then we also thought, like, there's such a small chance that this goes anywhere that, fine, like, we'll keep him on the team. He was a very close friend, but he'd been open in the communication. So really, in that final week, it was mainly me and my then co-founder, Ben. And he was the one who told me about YC in the first place, who was kind of going through stuff, really sort of grinding for this interview.
Listening, just could you give a quick update? What is YC? Because I think some people might not even know what it is, similar to how you were back in the day.
Yeah, absolutely. There was a time not so long ago where I also didn't know what it was. So YC stands for Y Combinator, and it's a startup accelerator program. And it's the same program that companies like Airbnb, Stripe, Dropbox. And essentially, it's a 3-month program in which you are accepted to. When I did it, it was $125,000 of funding. Now it's gone up to $500,000. And you receive 3 months of kind of training and guidance and mentorship from partners who themselves are normally successful entrepreneurs who've exited their own companies. And then you also meet amazing other founders in the batch. You have insight talks, you learn from other founders. It's basically just an amazing resource for people starting their company. They go through things like how to talk to users, how to prepare a pitch deck, how to get sales, how to do marketing. It's a really kind of comprehensive guide as to how to start your company. And then that culminates in what's called Demo Day, which is kind of like a convention of investors. So all the companies pitch their startups. And at that point, you get great exposure to, I think it was about 2,000 of Silicon Valley's top investors. And from there, most companies go on to raise their first or second funding round.
Awesome. So that 500K that they put in, or now that they put in, that's kind of the first round of funding. It's more of that family friends round.
It depends. Obviously for us it was. For a lot of companies, it's not the very first check that they take. I think we were slightly earlier in our journey to be accepted to YC. I would say for the majority of companies, it may be within their first round. So a lot of times companies that are actively fundraising when they apply have already raised a couple of checks, and then YC is kind of in addition to that first round, and then they raise kind of a follow-on round after Demo Day. And YC accepts companies of all stages, so right from the idea stage all the way up to much more mature companies. And for them, even though the valuation is kind of set, it's on a set deal of $125,000 for 7%, and now I think the extra 375,000 is on an MFN. I don't know the details. I didn't go through the recent batch, but because of the value of the exposure, the brand name, sometimes US market entry, these are all reasons that more mature companies still apply to YC. So there's really a whole range of startups.
And before I dive back in, because obviously we didn't even hear you get accepted yet, I'm just wondering, what was the full process? So you mentioned that you applied online, you had to do a video. Could you explain a little bit more about the full process?
Yes, so there's an online form and it's quite standard. It's quite long, but also they don't ask anything out of the ordinary. Basically, what's your company? What traction have you achieved? How long have you been working on it? Why are you the right people to be building this? What's nice about YC is they also ask some more questions about you as an individual, which I think is maybe a bit different from other accelerators. They really have a focus on the founders and the people. So once you do that, you also have to submit a 1 minute video just outlining your background, what you're working on, summarizing what you've put in the form basically. And it's to give the interviewers a chance to just kind of see how you are, see how you talk, and how you interact with your teammates. And that's it. So you submit that online. I don't know the exact timeline of how long they normally take to get back to companies, but for us, it was a month. And then the process is 1 10-minute interview, and then they accept you or reject you.
Wow.
For some companies in some spaces, so I think this is commonly done for biotech and hard tech companies, they may do a second interview very shortly after with an expert in the field because there is some expertise required. But for most people, it's just 1 10-minute interview and then a decision is made. And they make decisions really, really quickly, which is, as a founder, we always appreciate.
Awesome. Okay. So I want to dive back in. You had your first interview. You're staying up until 4 a.m., getting these emails going back and forth. You just lost a co-founder from in the beginning when you first applied. They're saying you have a week. You're going through finals. Then what's happening?
Let's try our best. And so it was, I remember on the Tuesday, so final interview was on a Friday. It was on the Tuesday that I'd scheduled the brainstorming session. And I said to Ben, my co-founder, that no matter what, no matter how bad the idea is, at the end of this hour-long meeting, we are coming out with an idea. We have to. And in the next couple of days, I've blocked the time to do user interviews, no matter what it is. I've blocked the time to make a landing page, get some initial feedback and traction. And he was just like, okay, fingers crossed. And so we were trying to think about problems that we'd experienced because we both kind of had the same feelings about Quill. Yeah, it's a cool idea, but are we the best people to be building this? How much do we really care about this space? So we thought maybe to build something we were more passionate about, what's something that we have really faced. And we were trying to think about like being a student, like not having enough money, moving internationally, things that we'd gone through. And it was actually when I went to the toilet. I have a bad habit of watching my skincare YouTubers when I'm on the toilet. And I also had my like array of skincare in front of me. And it was a very eureka moment where I was like, hold on a second. I know so much about this and there are so many problems. This is a huge industry with a ton of money and it's broken in many ways. There's very little tech actually solving problems. So I literally ran out of the toilet and I told Ben, I was like, Ben, I've got an idea. Like, I don't know what the idea is, but I've got the problem. The problem is skincare. It's so difficult to do in general. Like, it's embarrassing, it's painful, it's hard to find a solution. It's a huge market that doesn't have much technical innovation. Ben wasn't and isn't the biggest skincare enthusiast, but he was big into habit tracking and apps like that. So he was kind of familiar with the concept. And of course, everyone knows that skincare is a massive industry. So he got quite excited about it and let's do it. Like, let's go down this route. And so at the time, you know, the idea was more focused around the problem, which was, I don't know which skincare products to use. That was like the initial problem that we decided to tackle. In the next 4 days, I ended up doing about 60.
The next 4 days. Like...
I know, it was wild. I look back and I don't know how I did it. But I did 60 user interviews. So all these connections through Facebook groups. I started just begging and pleading, to be honest. Begging and pleading on these Facebook groups. Like, please talk to me about your skincare. Like, I just want to ask questions about your skincare journey. Asking friends, family, people that I hadn't spoken to in 10 years. Hello, I know this is random, but can we chat about skincare? And they'd be like, who is this crazy? And then, you know, after those conversations would end, I'd be like, do you have a friend that's into skincare? Can I talk to them as well? But what this did is it let me be more specific about what the problem is and what a potential solution could be. After doing these interviews, I came up with the idea that, okay, an app where you scan your face, it does some magic in the background and it gives you a product recommendation, but it's brand agnostic. So a couple of brands have software like this for their own brands, but there's nothing that takes all the products on the market and gives you an unbiased opinion on what would actually work. So then this was the initial idea. Okay, I'm just going to stick with it. I'll prepare for the YC interview, try to come up with a business model, come up with how we'll go to market. Even though me and Ben, you know, we all did the same degree, at the time, our CTO was by far the most talented developer on the team. So poor guy, his exams ended at 12 p.m. on the Friday. I told him, this is the idea, Tillman, go build it. Then from 12 till 8 p.m., he built the first version. From 8 till 10, I did 4 30-minute user demos. And then 10:30 was our next interview.
On the day of, basically.
Yeah, it was insane. We were frazzled. Like, we didn't know well, I knew what day it was, but we didn't know what to expect. We were absolutely exhausted, hadn't slept in a week, and we just didn't know what to expect. So we didn't know if it'd be with the same three interviewers. We didn't know if it would be 10 minutes. We literally had no idea what we were about to go into. But all I could say is I know that I tried my best, and I actually thought we were onto something. Importantly, even though it had been 4 days of working on, this new skincare company. At the time, it wasn't called Clear, it was called Haut, which means skin in German. Our then CTO was German and can't come up with a name. Let's just use the word skin in German. Okay. I can't come up with anything better. So it was the fact that even though we were so early into this, we'd already done more user interviews in 4 days than we had in 6 months with Quill. And it seemed more exciting. It seemed like we were actually the team to build this. There was a huge amount of market potential. So we got to the interview, no idea what to expect. And it was very different. So it was just with the head of admissions, a lady called Stephanie. And she was kind of, you tell me what you want to talk about. And I told her, so we did make a bit more progress on Quill. We got a couple more pilots, but actually we came up with a new idea. And that's what I want to talk to you about first. And the second interview was much, much slower paced and longer, and we went into a lot more depth about this new idea, Hout, and also
this new 4-day-old idea.
Yes. New 4-day-old idea. But I think what also became evident to me in that meeting is she was asking some pretty deep questions, but I had the answers. And it wasn't because I prepared in 4 days, but I prepared in like 10 years of being on these groups every single day, watching all the content creators, having gone to dermatologists, doctors, been through that whole process myself, and also having spoken to so many people about skincare. A lot of the knowledge was already there, which made me feel more confident about it as well. Whereas with meeting minutes, if you ask me what the perfect set of meeting minutes looks like I don't know. I'm not the expert. The conversation was a lot longer, and then it ended quite abruptly with, okay, well, you've got my email if you need anything. Bye. And bye. I was like, what just happened? Did we get rejected? Is that the end of the road with YC? So I went straight back into aggressive Ahana business mode, and I started drafting out an email. What's the deal? Have you accepted us? Where do we stand with you? Do we have to reapply? Will you look favorably upon our application? Thank God I never sent it, because I was so bamboozled and, adrenaline was so high. So
it's always good to go for a walk. Okay, give myself a minute. I've definitely had those moments where I'm writing really abruptly, just angry writing. So definitely good to always take a walk.
Exactly. That's great advice. Thankfully, before I could send it, she emailed us back asking us. It was literally 2 minutes later asking if we're still on the Zoom. At this point, keep in mind, it's midnight. Again, we haven't slept in the last week. We don't know what's happening. Term has just ended and it's Christmas next week. And so, what more could she possibly want from us? And she gets on the call and she was like, yeah, I just phoned my colleague. We'd like to offer you a spot in the next batch. It starts in 2 weeks. Incorporate a company in the US, open a bank account. See you then. Do you have any questions? And honestly, we were so shocked. My first question was, are you sure? The second question was, which company? And she was like, well, it's your company. You figure it out. Oh, okay.
That's because then you know that they were really just believing in you. So it's like, at the end of the day, it didn't matter what company, it's you as a founder, and they're going to give you money to go and do whatever idea it is that you want to do.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's how I see it now. At the time, I was absolutely terrified, and I just didn't know what to do, because it was also this decision of B2B SaaS company that we had then worked on for about 6 months by the time we got into YC, or this 4-day-old idea that I was really excited about, but was worried about making, a rash decision. And the other thing was also knowing, there was delight on my face and on Ben's face. But Tillman, the CTO, he'd already said, he was like, I don't want to do this as my job. And, skincare is not his passion. And, it was never something I held against him. And is a very close friend of mine still. But his face went bright red, and I knew from that point the next drama will ensue, that Tillman's not going to want to join, and YC have basically accepted us because they like our team, and now we're going to lose our superstar developer. So at that point, the next series of worries was coming through, like, are they going to fund us? Are they going to now pull back the funding? What's going to happen? I mean, what could we do? We told them, we were like, me and Ben want to do this, but Tillman's not going to, and they were like, build your product. And that's not to say that they weren't impressed with Tillman. I think he's a very impressive guy. But I think they saw that there was an opportunity here, and it's not a heavily technical product. Obviously, it's a tech product, so you need some competency. But Ben and I had enough. We have enough of a tech background to build it ourselves. We don't necessarily need the best developer from day one because it's more about validating the idea and really building something that people want, which I guess they saw in our team at that point. That's how the journey started. I mean, there was also the slight stress about the degree because we were still enrolled full time, and then YC expect a full time commitment. So we had to email our department. We are like, apologies, we know it's past midnight on a Saturday, on a Friday night, and like you've gone for holiday for Christmas. Can we talk, please? And they were very understanding. And I had kept them like somewhat in the loop. There is a 0.0000001% chance this happens, but if it does, I would like to have a degree. Is there any way that this can actually happen? So when it did, arrangements were already in place. They were really happy for us. It was a bit more complicated for Ben though. So he hadn't had those conversations, which is also why he couldn't graduate without going back and finishing the degree. But for me, it was freedom. It was, I could basically end the degree then and there, commit fully to the company and still graduate with a bachelor's, which, you know, is a lot safer for me.
Yeah, and that's awesome. I feel like you're so ahead of the game already having that in place. And so once you got in, YC was remote for you. It was full time. Yeah. How was it? Would you recommend it to an individual who's doing a startup?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a bit of a YC fangirl at this point. And truly, I'm so grateful because if it wasn't for them, the honest truth is, I don't think I'd have had the opportunity to build the company. And for that, I will always be grateful to them. But absolutely, it's so helpful. And I think that right from going through the absolute basics of, you know, as I mentioned earlier, how to talk to customers, how to develop your product, how to put together a pitch, what do investors look for? All of that guidance was incredibly helpful, and having one-on-one contact with such accomplished people in the field, and not even just the partners, but even the other companies. Some people there were super nice, just incredibly successful, kind people who were happy to help. And so the community is definitely an amazing part of YC. And then going from, you know, being a undergraduate physics student to suddenly having a network of entrepreneurs that I can ask these questions was extremely valuable. So I think all of that was really helpful, and for me provided immense value. I know there are some people out there that are skeptical of what YC can add, and you know, perhaps if you are a serial entrepreneur or you've done YC once before, maybe if you go through it again you won't get as much because you've already built that community. Or I don't know, if you're a know-it-all and know it all already, then you might feel like you don't need the guidance. But that's not the type of person that I am. I always love having mentors and advice and people that can critique me and challenge me on what I'm doing. So I think that if you're that type of personality that appreciates the support and, you know, wants people to talk to and, you know, wants to be challenged, then I think that it's a fantastic program.
Awesome. And then you ended up raising a pre-seed round last November. So was
Yes.
this, you finished YC. How long was YC for you?
There's so much drama on this story, Alana. Got into YC for the winter 21 batch, which, as I mentioned before, YC is 3 months. So that ran from January to March. Mm-hmm. However, by the time we got to March, at that point, I built up a beta community of skincare enthusiasts, and we were testing assumptions a lot with them. And, you know, Tillman, the CTO, had left the company. And then we were faced with the question, how do we do this? We've got 3 months until we need to be ready to pitch to investors. You know, my first time raising a round, I have no idea what to do. But as far as common sense goes, you'd think traction helps. To have traction, you need to have a product. To have a product, you need to build a product. So, you know, I was doing a lot of work on validating the idea, like testing assumptions with real users. And then simultaneously, me and Ben, you know, we've never built a mobile app. Like, I've built web apps before. We've both got good Python experience. But realistically, can we build this with such a short timeline? The answer, as we thought then, was no. So then we tried to hire people, which was a bit of a disaster, to be honest. So it was partly my fault that I was trying to save as much money. Even though we raised the money from YC, I'm very stingy by nature. And so we had some more legitimate like software engineers willing to work for us. But there was this one guy without a profile picture on LinkedIn, and he was willing to be paid only if he delivered. And I was like, why not?
Nothing to lose.
Nothing to lose. In the end, we paid him and lost. So it didn't end well. And what happened is this all culminated very close to demo day. So I'd actually started even meeting with some investors. And, you know, bear in mind, I'm like a 21-year-old girl, first time founder, never spoken to an investor before, and I'm telling these investors, oh yeah, our app's going to launch next week, and then we check the code this contract has written and it's like non-exist, like an app that we absolutely cannot launch. It was
Why did you still
terrible.
pay him?
I don't know. He had put time in, and it was kind of mean to take his time, even though his work was terrible and the agreement was a milestone contract. The thing is, he was also a bit of a smart aleck. So if we said, here is a design for a feed, like a social media feed that scrolls, he did build the feed. The problem was he didn't like link up any of the buttons. So if you try to refresh it, the whole app crashes. If you try to like something, nothing happens. If you try
Oh
to like,
no.
so technically he did implement the design that we sent him. It just didn't work. So it was a learning for us as well, where sometimes if you're dealing with people or contractors, especially, you have to be super duper explicit about what you want. And in any case, like his rate wasn't that expensive. And to protect us as well, we don't want to extort people. He has put time in and he is claiming to have delivered this. It's better to just pay him and let him leave us alone than engage in a fight with him over this. So we cut our losses with him, and it wasn't very long. It was about, I think, 3 or 4 weeks start to finish with him. We cut the relationship, and that was fine. He was happy with his money. We were unhappy with the app. He didn't cause any problems beyond that. But where the problems were caused was, as I said, I'd started talking to investors, already don't have that much credibility. And then we were now faced with this issue of, well, actually, we don't have an app and we don't have traction. And actually now I realize more that fundraising is about selling a vision, but at the time I thought it was more meritocratic and I thought it was just about your traction and what you could show for your achievements. And we had little to show. And this is also, another part of why I think YC is really helpful and why it's often good to have open relationships and conversations. We kept our group partners in the loop with everything, all the drama that was going on. And so when it came near to demo day, they actually gave us the option. And I don't think they do this for every company because, of course, who wouldn't want 6 more months to get their numbers better, make their company better? But for us, the company was super early stage and we'd spent very, very little of the money. The only money we'd spent was on this contractor. So we didn't need to fundraise. And with Demo Day, you only get one shot to do it. So they said, the decision is yours, but if you want, you can defer to a future Demo Day. And at the time, again, it was a difficult decision. And we actually did have one investor who was willing to commit 100K. We didn't know if that money would still be there in 6 months' time if we went to fundraise again. And at the time, the only money that we'd raised was the 125 from YC. So that would effectively double our runway. And there's no guarantee this money would be there in a couple of months. So it was a really tough decision. And it was actually when talking to another founder, going through YC, where, I was sharing, now I can laugh about it. At the time, it was not a laughing matter. I was very stressed. And she was like, why don't you just build this yourself? You seem competent. You've got a technical degree. You've seen what other developers are like. Why not just try yourself? And I think back then I wasn't that self-confident and I really didn't think I could do it. But I think it took hearing it from someone else to make me think, actually, it's not rocket science. I have the basic skills to do this. If it doesn't work out, we still have to hire someone anyway. So why not just give it a shot? I'm intelligent. Ben is intelligent. We're both in this learning phase of our life. Why not try? And also, why not call in every favor possible? I'd maintained a great relationship with Tillman, the ex-CTO. My boyfriend is also technical. He did the same degree. And what Michael Seibel throughout YC, he was like, this is the time to call in every favor from your friends and family as you possibly can. And I had the resources and the people around me that I could trust that I could. So in the end, I took her advice. I said to YC, we'll defer demo day. We'll turn down the 100K from this investor and we'll go for the next one at the end of August or early September. At the end of March, basically hit a full reset, did a proper spec of exactly what the MVP should be like. And then at the start of April, me and Ben just started coding all day, every day. We launched the initial version to our beta community after just 1 month. And then we spent the next month testing, ironing out the bugs, building in features that we needed for the first public version. And then we launched another piece of drama. It was still called Hout, but nobody could pronounce it. So even YC would be so awkward about it. Okay, up next we have Ho, Hot, Hout. No one could say it. And we're a consumer platform. We need people to be able to talk about us. But equally, we couldn't come up with a better name. And there was so much work to do that a name, rebrand was the last thing we were thinking about. But on the day of submitting to the App Store, I told Ben, we can't do this. No one says our name. They just call it the skincare app, or they just don't say the name at all because they're too embarrassed, or they butcher the name and no one can search for us. I actually did a bunch of like polls on LinkedIn and on internally with YC. This is where the community was so helpful. And I think I shortlisted like a dropper, droplet, clear was obviously one of them, Hout was still one of them, and there were mixed responses, and it was a very hectic 24 hours. But in the end, the public voted for clear. I was a proponent for clear as well. I liked it. There are downsides with the name, the biggest one being that it's a common word, so it's harder to find us on the App Store and the website. But equally, it's a name people can say, and if we build a killer product, that will solve these problems. And that's really what I want to do. So made the decision to rebrand and launch Clear in June of last year.
Were you scared that you wouldn't get the trademarks to be able to actually use the name Clear? Because you seem like you just submitted it right after it kind of won these voting rights. So,
it's fine.
Startup. No.
You don't ask for permission, you beg for forgiveness after. I'll wait till someone tells me it's a problem and then I'll figure out the solution. But for now, my priority is to get downloads. I'm not going to get downloads if no one says our name. So
yep, I love that.
that was the train of logic, and that's still been the case. Hopefully, after this podcast, I don't get some angry emails. So yeah, that was how we launched, and since then we've grown to over 7,000 users. We won a competition by L'Oreal, which opened a lot of doors for corporate partnerships and some of the data work that we're doing. Grew the team, obviously fundraised as well, so had a lot of amazing learning experiences since.
Well, congratulations first off. I also saw that you won that L'Oreal award, so that's awesome. And for people who are just starting out, kind of similar to you, they have their product, they launched it. How did you get those first customers and those first beta users?
It's not glamorous. It was begging and pleading first. So again, the same people I begged and pleaded, reconnected with friends from my primary school. I've got this thing, it's free. It would help me out tremendously if you downloaded it. And I bit the bullet again. I think this is something a lot of founders don't talk about, these really like unglamorous or even uncomfortable things to do. No one likes asking for favors. It's just not an inherently fun thing to do. But I think depending on your priorities and how much you want something, sometimes you have to push yourself a bit out of the comfort zone. And for me, I was willing to do that. So, and in some cases, actually reignited old friendships, which was quite nice. But the first thing I did was really trying to leverage my personal network, which wasn't that big. I didn't have much of like a personal brand online, but that was the first thing I did. The second thing I did was on what I call the watering holes. So where do I know people who would be into this app hang out? And that was mainly skincare groups online. So on Facebook groups, Reddit threads, comment section of skincare YouTubers, comment section on Instagram profiles that are around skincare. And I properly just infiltrated them. And even with that, like, it wasn't trivial. You're not allowed to self-promote on Facebook and Reddit. So I had to find a way of communicating, download my app in a way that didn't sound like it was self-promotional. So I had to really tell the story and make people realize that I'm doing this to help them as well. Like, it's not just for me to become, a success or the next billion-dollar company. It's to actually try and help people like me who've suffered with skin issues to navigate their journeys. So that was like the second thing. I think the third thing I did was incentive schemes. Again, like, the stinginess is a common thread through this story. So I didn't want to spend money on it. And I feel like any company can just pump money into Facebook ads and get users, and that's not the approach that I wanted to take. So instead, we worked with like a skincare nutritionist who made a guide, and then if users signed up, they got this guide for free. Or if micro influencers signed up and brought some of their followers to our platform, we'd give them a verified badge and allow them to monetize affiliate links through our platform. So really looking at who are the different stakeholders, what can we do that plays into existing behaviors and needs, and actually build that into how we get referrals, how we get users to our platform. And that worked really, really well, actually, the incentive schemes. And then finally, and this is sort of the more ongoing, more sustainable strategy, has been social media marketing. I am not a social media expert, and I have failed and am failing still on some platforms, especially Instagram and TikTok. I tried so hard and I'm still trying, but it hasn't really caused any growth. However, when I first started the company, the only real social platform I used was LinkedIn. And on LinkedIn, I did have a good number of connections. And what I found is the more I posted on LinkedIn, the more visibility I'd get and the more downloads I would get. So simultaneously, I knew I had some platform on LinkedIn, not very big, but something. I decided to also start a YouTube channel, partly to document all these crazy learnings that I was having so I didn't forget with the amount of stuff going on, but also as a way to build a reputation, build a name in the startup industry. This was also to put myself in front of investors or potential hires, just kind of show more about me and the company and what we're actually doing. So I started a YouTube channel, and I did get Twitter. Twitter was a platform I was always scared of. And I tried so hard. I got Twitter in January of 2021, tried to post. I just couldn't bring myself to do it. And it was only actually after I closed my round and I was, okay, it's literally like, it's my job. I have to take this as a challenge to do it, which is also why I tried really hard on TikTok at that point. TikTok went nowhere, but Twitter, I did start building our following. And I think it was just sheer luck. I don't still really know why. But what I found is whenever I tweeted something that was slightly attention grabbing, got a bit of attention, it would instantly convert to app downloads. So that was like a real way that I unlocked that, oh, through my personal branding, if I tweet something slightly sarcastic or slightly edgy, it gets me downloads. I'd rather do that than have to pay Facebook for ads.
Oh, and
So
those get so expensive too. It's absolutely insane. And being able to use this creator economy to be able to brand your products, I feel like is so important nowadays. And it's cheaper and a way to get sales, which I think is just helpful.
It's cheap and it's more sustainable as well, I think, than constantly having to come up with new or attention-seeking activities or more traditional marketing. I think social media can be really, really powerful.
Awesome. Well, Ahana, I want to end it off. Do you have any final advice, whether it's to get your first sale or to get users on product or even just to get into YC? Because you've obviously done it all and I can't wait to continue to watch what you're building.
I would say the biggest piece of advice is to not be afraid of rejection or failure. And I think that applies to all of the things you mentioned, and also to my biggest successes. Behind all of them has been considerable failure. And, you know, in this podcast or maybe on my Twitter or LinkedIn, you'll see the YC, the funding round, the L'Oreal competition. But behind the scenes is me talking to 200 investors and getting 36 yeses, you know, doing 10 investor meetings a day and really, really struggling with the fundraise. Or for the L'Oreal partnership, also reaching out to other brands, even much smaller brands that ignored the emails. And for accelerator programs, also applying to honestly, even the small accelerator programs within our university and getting rejected from all of them. And if I'd have let those failures stop me from applying or giving it my best shot, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I wouldn't have opened up those opportunities. It's easier said than done. No one likes being rejected. No one likes experiencing failure. But what I've tried to do to get through it more and kind of change my mindset about it is, if I'm not experiencing failure or some kind of rejection, I'm probably not pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And that's a choice. I can't control if someone rejects me or if someone says no, but I can control what I do. And I would rather be in a position where I am getting rejection because I'm actually challenging myself and growing and learning, rather than like coasting through life and, you know, never experiencing any of that. So I think that mindset's definitely helped me. And I think I've always been a bit like that, but especially in the early days, just not being scared to hear no.
And I think that mindset is so important, because if you don't take a chance, I feel like nothing like extraordinary is going to happen. You just, as you mentioned, just coast along in life. And I think if you take chances, if you bet on yourself, and if you do the things that are scary, the possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
Well, I can't wait to see what you continue to build with Clear and watch your journey. I think we covered so many important topics today, and thank you so much for coming on the Girls Table.
Thank you so much for having me, Alana. It's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Of course. Talk soon.
Bye.
Namaste.